remember the first time that kind of touched on that stillness where the mind just stopped. And it was the beginning of when I had met Eckhart, and I was at his place. And it's just like I didn't know anything. That's what it felt like. I didn't know anything. I mean, I knew my name, I knew him. But I didn't know if I could remember how to drive. Literally, I just didn't know. I remember thinking, I don't think I can drive. I just had it was like no concept of driving. I knew cars and I knew that I had the ability to drive, but my mind was so still that I just didn't know that I could drive, and I didn't trust that I could drive. So he drove me home. And then I went back the next day when that sort of all cleared and the mind sort of came back, and picked up my car and drove. And then I'm like, wow, I wonder if I could have driven. So the next time that sort of happened, I just thought, I'm getting into my car. So I'm getting into my car. And it's like I still had this feeling like I didn't know. It was like I didn't know if I could drive. But it's amazing what the body just knows what to do. After something that is so habitual, you just know. And there I was driving. It was like no thought, and I was driving. I'm like, oh, wow, this is cool. It was almost like a different experience. So as we begin to awaken, we begin to see just the sort of the direct experiences that we may have as a result of the thinking mind subsiding. There was another time, it was actually the very first retreat that Eckhart had, and there were only like 10 people. Now there are over 1,000 people. Lovely, it's really good. Don't get me wrong, but there was 10 people. And I remember sitting in the hall before he came, and I was meditating, and suddenly I heard music. And I went, oh, somebody turned on some music. And then when he came in, the music was still playing. And as he was talking, the music was still playing. I thought, well, that's really weird. He's not shutting off the music. I wonder why that is. So after the talk, I decided, I was going to ask somebody, I go, like, why is there music playing when he's talking? And they go, we don't have any music playing. I went, really? Because it was just like this one sound. It wasn't like music as in a melody. It was just like, and it wasn't that om. I can't even imitate what the sound was, but it was just this note. And it was after the retreat, and it stayed with me for a week, maybe it was even 2 weeks. And I thought, wow, this is incredible. But then when it stayed for that, week or 2 weeks, the same note over and over again, I remember having this thought of, oh my gosh, can it play something different? And then it was literally, I don't know it was a very short time later, within that same day, it stopped. Didn't hear the music anymore, and it never came back. So it was interesting how those thoughts that we have can actually create what's happening. So it's like, okay, consciousness is giving something, some sort of mystical experience, even though that mystical experience itself is not it. Don't get me wrong, this was a lovely experience, but no experience, no matter how profound, is it. Because you can't turn that stillness, that consciousness, that formless dimension into an object. So it's just a wonderful experience. But it was interesting how that when the mind comes in and those thoughts come in, it can almost instantly stop whatever spiritual experience you are having. But don't get attached to that experience. So some of you may start to experience things like that. And it's very pleasant. It's very, very pleasant. And it kind of gives you that sort of warm, fuzzy feeling. But it will go, whether it's through a thought form or it just subsides on its own. It will go, because anything from any form eventually goes, eventually dies. It arises and it leaves, dissipates, it's gone. So don't think that or believe that a profound experience is that state of consciousness called the formless dimension. Nothing in the world of form and no experience is that formless dimension. That formless dimension lives in us, around us. It's here. It's consciousness itself. And within consciousness, all these forms appear. It's like they bubble up, and it's just like it appears. I remember sitting in a restaurant one time, I think we were in Chicago, and you can see like the waiter and people there, but it seemed like as if they just suddenly appeared. It was a very strange experience. It's like, wow. Okay, we seem to think that we are, this body, it gets born and it, goes through all these different stages and experience to grow into these adults, but it's almost like it just appears. That everything appears, even though in time, in the so-called world of form, there is time, and it takes time for the appearance. It takes time to put these flowers together. It takes time to grow up from a little baby to full grown, and then back to shrinking into almost wearing diapers again, into a little baby, like a little baby. But we take our lives, our personal lives, very personally. And that's the egoic mind. And we go through this egoic mind. I have no idea why, but we do. We seem to all go through it. But that's perhaps part of that evolution of consciousness, having that egoic mind and then transcending that egoic mind. So we can live in this so-called state of consciousness and therefore create a different world. And only that state of consciousness can create that different world. You cannot create a new world through the old state of consciousness. In other words, the thinking mind, which is currently now within this consciousness. So it's interesting how this shift in the human being is beginning to happen. And we just don't know sometimes how that shift is going to take place. Ideally, we might think, it would be wonderful that nothing negative or nothing bad will happen. But from the higher perspective, can say there's neither good or bad. But thinking makes it so. So we don't know whether we're going to have to go through an entire civilization that breaks down before the next we go up that ladder, so to speak, into the next level of consciousness. All we know right now is that we are awakening. And how that awakening plays out, as a human, we will never know. And it doesn't, in a way, it doesn't matter, because if you're thinking towards the future, which is on the mind level, the thinking level, where you think towards the future, or what's going to happen, or you start to worry about what's going to happen in the future, we bring our attention back to this present moment, where we neither live in the past or the future, but here, right now, taking one step at a time. And it's almost like watching this world. It'll play out as it'll play out, and we continue just to take that one step at a time, and to be in that open state of consciousness, in stillness, so then we can respond to what is happening in this world, instead of reacting to what is happening. So when we respond, we're in that stillness, and out of stillness we make that response. Reaction is out of the mind, out of fear. So then we'll just react, and then we'll just create the same sort of unconscious manifestation and continue on the same route of consciousness, the state of consciousness. So it's like rising above the current state of consciousness, rising above that to that level of openness, that level of true freedom, really, where you're not bombarded by thoughts or attacked by the emotional body. And will thoughts ever go away, or the emotional body go away? As long as we're human, I doubt it, but we can rise above it. We'll have them. It's like there was this monk who was sitting on a rock. He was a spiritual teacher. And he was just, well, maybe it's not a monk, but anyways, you get the story, because some monks, they can't have children, but it's one that can, okay? So he's weeping, he's got his hands in his face and he's weeping. And his student comes up to him and says, Master, why are you crying? And the master looks up from his hands, because I just found out my son has died. And he goes back to weeping. And then, of course, the student is thinking, and asks the question, but Master, if you say all this in the world is illusion, then why are you weeping? And then he looks up from his hands and he says, because this is the saddest illusion of them all. So we still may have emotions, and we'll go through those emotions, because things that happen create that emotion, create something in us, but we don't have to resist it. The more that we resist that emotion, the more that it persists. So if we just allow that emotion to arise and come, it can actually actually be gone within a minute, 30 seconds even, depending on the situation, the story behind the emotion. But it could be gone, or if we just allow it just to be there, and you be this space, because you are that space. You are that space anyways. It's just you're not connected to it. You're not having your attention on that space. You're having the attention on the form dimension, and perhaps a belief, a story that you may have attached yourself on that form dimension. For example, I shouldn't be feeling sad. If all this is illusion, so I shouldn't be feeling these emotions. No. We're human beings, and then on the human level, we have thoughts that come through. We have emotions that'll come through, and we just allow that. Give space to that. We are the space in which all things happen. So there's no doubt that in this world things are changing. Something is happening. What's going to happen? Don't know. How it's going to happen? Don't know. Will we have a breakdown first of civilization? Don't know. But if you look back in history, there's always been a breakdown before it rises up again.